I never figured myself for a savior, not after what the frontier had taken from me. But that day, under a sun that beat down like the hammer of God himself, everything changed. I was riding the rim of the Badlands, my horse buck kicking up red dust that clung to my boots like old regrets. The air shimmered with heat, blurring the line between earth and sky. And that's when I saw it, a forgotten watering hole, half choked with tumbleweeds and cracked mud, and right there in the middle of it all, a figure sprawled out like she'd been thrown from the devil's own hand. My heart slammed against my ribs as I reined in buck, my hand instinctively dropping to the Colt at my hip. Distant gunshots cracked the silence, faint but sharp, echoing off the canyons like warnings from ghosts. I scanned the horizon, nothing but endless scrub and jagged rocks. But those shots meant trouble was close, maybe circling back. Dismounting slow, I approached, boots crunching on the parched ground. She was Apache. That much was clear from the beaded moccasins and the fringed buckskin skirt. But she wasn't moving. Her leg was twisted wrong, bone jutting through the skin in a mess of blood and dirt. And in her clenched fists, she held a satchel stained dark with what looked like fresh crimson. "Miss," I called out, voice low, not wanting to spook her or whatever was hunting her. Her eyes snapped open dark as midnight wells, fierce and unblinking. She tried to scramble back, but pain twisted her face, and she hissed through gritted teeth, something in her native tongue that sounded like a curse. I held up my hands, palms out. "Easy now. I'm not here to hurt you." But those eyes, they bored into me, full of defiance and something deeper, a raw fear that mirrored the hollow ache I carried since losing Sarah and little Tommy. To that fever 3 years back, the ranch had been my prison ever since, a lonely spread on the edge of nowhere, where memories whispered in the wind. She whispered then, in broken English laced with an accent like rolling thunder, "They come." For this, her fingers tightened on the satchel, knuckles white. I knelt closer, ignoring the risk. Hell, what did I have left to lose? The wound was bad, a compound fracture from what looked like a bullet graze or a hard fall. Maybe both. Infection would set in fast out here. "You need help," I said, pulling my canteen free. She eyed it warily, lips cracked and dry, but when I tilted it to her mouth, she drank deep, never letting go of that bag. Water spilled down her chin, mixing with dust to form muddy trails, and in that moment, I felt a pull, like the first tug of a lasso round my chest. Who was she? What was in that satchel worth dying for? Hoisting her up was no easy feat. She was strong-built, taller than most women I'd known, with muscles honed by a life harder than mine. She protested weakly, but I got her slung over Buck's saddle, her body warm against my back as I mounted up. "Hold on," I muttered, spurring the horse toward home. The ride was brutal, the sun scorching my neck, her shallow breasts hot on my shoulder. My mind raced pursuers, outlaws, tribal rivals. I'd heard stories of Apache feuds spilling over into settler lands, but this felt personal, like she'd stolen fire from the gods themselves. And me, I was just Jack Harlan, a broken rancher with calluses for company and ghosts for kin. The homestead came into view as the sun dipped lower, a weathered cabin hunkered against a rocky bluff, with a corral for my few head of cattle and a barn sagging under years of neglect. I carried her inside, the door creaking like old bones, and laid her on the cot in the corner, the same one where Sarah had taken her last breath. She sat up immediate, eyes darting like a trapped coyote, hand glued to that satchel. "Rest easy," I said, lighting the lantern. The flickering light cast shadows that danced across her sun-bronzed face, highlighting high cheekbones and a scar along her jaw, probably from some long-ago scrape. She was beautiful in a wild way, untamed, and it stirred something in me I thought dead. Ignoring her glare, I fetched bandages from the shelf, a bottle of vodka whiskey, and my knife. "This leg needs setting, or you'll lose it." She said nothing, just nodded once, her stoicism hitting me like a gut punch. As I cut away the bloodied fabric, she gripped the cot's edge, sweat beading on her forehead, but not a sound escaped her lips. I poured the whiskey over the wound-fire meaty fire, and she arched slightly, eyes squeezing shut. Setting the bone was worse. The crack echoed in the quiet room, and I felt her pain in my own bones, a shared agony that made my hands tremble. When it was done, splintered with slats and tied tight, I stepped back, wiping blood on my jeans. "There, now sleep." But sleep didn't come easy for either of us. A sandstorm kicked up that night, howling like banshees outside, rattling the shutters and sifting dust through the cracks. I took the porch, rifle across my lap, staring into the swirling void. Inside, through the window, I could see her silhouette in the lantern glow sitting up, vigilant, her shadow long and wavering. Who was she guarding against? Me, or the shadows chasing her? My thoughts drifted to Sarah, how she'd fought that fever with the same quiet strength, and a lump formed in my throat. Loneliness had been my companion, but now, with this stranger under my roof, it felt sharper, like a knife-twisting dot in the dead of night. Her fever spiked. I heard her muttering, fever-dream words in Apache, and I went in, cooling her brow with a damp cloth. She thrashed once, then stilled under my touch, her hand brushing mine. "Kaya," she whispered, eyes half open. My name, Kaya. It was like a gift, that name, soft and strong, and I repeated it softly, feeling it settle in my chest. As the storm raged, she pieced out her story in fragments, exiled from her tribe for taking an artifact, a sacred amulet, that could clear her brother's name from a false charge of selling out to white traders. Treason, she called it, her voice hoarse but fierce. They frame him to take our lands. Her eyes met mine, pleading and proud, and I felt the weight of her world crashing into mine. Prejudices I'd harbored raids, losses faded a bit in that light. She was no enemy. She was a fighter, like me. Come dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the world scoured clean. I rustled up beans and hardtack over the fire, the smell filling the cabin like a fragile piece. Kaya insisted on helping, hobbling over with a makeshift cane I'd whittled, mending a torn blanket with deft stitches. Her hands were rough, scarred from work, but there was grace in them, a quiet power that drew me in. We ate in silence at first, but then she asked about the ranch. Why alone? Her question cut deep, and I told her about Sarah and Tommy, the epidemic that stole them, leaving me to rot in this dust bowl. Her eyes softened, and she touched my arm briefly, a spark, electric, that made my heart stutter. Loss, it carves us, she said, and in that moment, I saw her own scars, deeper than the one on her jaw. We stepped outside to repair the corral fence, wine torn from the storm. As we worked, her cane slipped in the loose dirt, and she stumbled. I caught her, arms around her waist, our faces inches apart. Time froze, the scent of sage on her skin, the warmth of her breath, her eyes searching mine with a vulnerability that mirrored my own buried longings. My pulse thundered. I'd forgotten what it felt like to hold someone, to feel alive in that raw, human way. She pulled away gently, but the air hummed with unspoken possibility. A thread of connection in this harsh land. That's when trouble crested the Ridge 3 riders, dust clouds billowing behind them. Outlaws, by the look, weathered hats, bandanas masking faces, rifles slung low. My gut twisted. They weren't random. Get down, I barked, shoving Kaya behind the water trough. Bullets kicked up dirt at my feet as I drew my Colt, the familiar weight steadying me. Stay back, I yelled, but they charged, whooping like demons. The first one came straight at me, firing wild. I dropped to a knee, aimed true, and squeezed the shot hit his chest dead center, sending him tumbling from his horse in a spray of blood. The second veered, but I rolled aside as his bullet splintered the fence post, then fired twice, catching him in the shoulder and gut. He screamed, crumpling like a rag doll. The third, smarter or coward liar, grazed my arm with a hot streak of lead before wheeling his horse and bolting for the hills. Pain bloomed, but adrenaline dulled it. Kaya emerged, eyes wide, tearing a strip from her shirt to bind the wound. Her fingers lingered on my skin, trembling slightly, and in that touch, I felt a rush protectiveness, yes, but something warmer. A flicker of desire that scared me as much as the gunfire. Back inside, tension hummed thick as smoke. I confronted her about the satchel, voice rougher than intended. What's worth all this blood? She hesitated, then opened it, revealing a sacred eagle feather amulet, etched with symbols that glowed in the light. Proof, she said. My brother, innocent. Traders lie to steal gold on our lands. Her story unfolded, corrupt men framing him to claim hidden veins. Then fever hit her again, infection flaring. I tended her through the night. Her delirious murmurs pulling at my heartstrings, calls for her brother, pleas for home. My own grief surfaced. I whispered about Sarah, how her laugh had lit up this cabin, now echoing empty. Kaya's hand found mine in the haze, squeezing weakly, and tears pricked my eyes. Dawn broke with her recovering, and we shared a meal by the fire. She laughed soft, like rain on parched earth at my fumbling with rope braiding, and it thawed me further, that sound wrapping around my soul like a warm blanket. But outside, a flash flood roared down the arroyo, swollen from distant rains. We raced to secure the livestock, water surging knee-deep, pulling at us like greedy hands. Kaya slipped in the mud, current dragging her under. I dove in, grabbing her arm, hauling her close in a desperate embrace. Soaked, hearts pounding, we collapsed inside, the near loss igniting a spark. I thought I'd lost you, I admitted, voice cracking, my isolation cracking with it. She confessed her fear of rootlessness, eyes shining with unged tears. That night, under the stars she named in Apache words like poetry our hands brushed. Whispers of romance booming against the cultural divide. Danger returned at dawn. A tribal scout, lean and painted, rode up demanding the amulet. Afe, he accused, eyes blazing. I stood firm, rifle ready, protective instinct surging. He left with threats, hinting at deeper plots straighters pulling strings. We fortified the place, and in the chaos, Kaya found Sarah's old locket. My outburst was sharp, don't touch that. But her empathy soothed, beginning to mend my shattered heart. As thunder rolled that evening. We shared a kiss by the hearth tentative, searching, worlds colliding in heat and tenderness. It was slow, like the desert blooming after rain, and it left me breathless, yearning for more in this unforgiving land. The kiss lingered on my lips like the aftertaste of sweet water in a drought. But dawn brought no peace, only the gnawing certainty that trouble was coiling tight around us. Kaya's eyes met mine over breakfast, a mix of gratitude and wariness. Her hand absently touching the amulet now tucked back in the satchel. We can't stay, she said, voice steady but laced with urgency. They'll come back, stronger. I nodded, though the thought of leaving my ranch, the last tether, to Sarah twisted my gut. But for her, I'd ride into hell itself. We packed quick, provisions, ammunition, and Buck saddled for two. As we rode out, the cabin shrieking behind us in the dust, I glanced back, wondering if I'd ever see it again, or if this path would forge something new from the ashes of my old life. The canyon swallowed us whole, red walls rising like silent sentinels, the air thick with the scent of creosote and hidden dangers. Kaya directed us toward tribal lands, her knowledge of the terrain a lifeline in this maze. But whispers of pursuit dogged us, distant hoofbeats that faded where we listened to hard. Shadows flitting on ridges that could be rocks or riders. My mind raced with questions. Who exactly were these traitors? How deep did their corruption run? Kaya shared snippets as we rode, her body pressed against mine in the saddle, a distracting warmth. They called themselves the Carson brothers, white men with silver tongues and iron fists. They bribe elders, forge maps, all to claim gold buried in sacred grounds. Her words painted a picture of betrayal that mirrored my own losses, raids I blamed on her people, but now tainted by greed from my side of the fence. We made camp in a hidden alcove as the sun dipped, stars emerging like old friends. Kaya bandaged a fresh cut on my hand from a thorny bush, her fingers gentle, tracing the lines of my palm. You fight like a warrior, she murmured, eyes lifting to mine. In that quiet, our conversation turned intimate admissions of love budding from trials, defying the scorn we'd face. The world will call it wrong, I said, voice rough. A rancher and an Apache, she smiled faintly, leaning closer. The heart knows no borders. Her words stirred a fire in me, a longing I buried deep, and as we huddled against the chill, her head on my shoulder, I felt rebirth stirring, like spring after a brutal winter. But peril shattered the peace at midnight. A rock slide thundered down the canyon wall, boulders crashing like artillery. Ambush, I yelled, pulling Kaya behind the outcrop as stones rained. Dust choked the air, and through it, I glimpsed figures, pursuers triggering the slide.